This episode is brought to you by Love Hurts. Kiwi Kwan has had quite a career, from childhood roles in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom and The Goonies to a recent Academy Award win for Everything Everywhere All at Once. But now Ki finally stars as a leading man in the film Love Hurts. Love Hurts is the perfect date night movie with its mix of over-the-top action, comedy, and a ton of heart. Love Hurts. Only at theaters February 7th.
Don't miss out on the final football game of the season with Prize Picks. Join now because Prize Picks are giving away a free pick for the big game where 1 yard equals 1 win. Just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Download the Prize Picks app and use code FIELD and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code FIELD on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks. Run your game. Must be present in certain states. Visit prizepicks.com for restrictions and details.
Kroger Delivery has one mission: to deliver the freshest food right to your door. That's why our drivers are pros. Our trucks are refrigerated. And when it comes to low prices, we always deliver. With $20 off your first order of $75 or more, there's no better time to get in on the action. Mission accomplished. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
Welcome back to another exciting edition of the Pointless Exercise podcast. It's time to remember this crap. Mike Donahue is here to remember crap. Mike, how are you?
Good, Andy. Happy opening day.
Yeah, not to date the podcast, because I know people will be listening to these for years.
Might as well timestamp it.
Yes, this was opening day 2022, and the Cubs. Those of you in the future now know, of course, that the Cubs won the World Series that year in shocking fashion, and that they got off on the right foot when they beat Corbin Burns and the burly Brewmen of Milwaukee.
Defending Cy Young champion Corbin Burns, no? Is he not?
He is. Yes, he's very good. He's probably, well, that's a question for a different podcast, but in the new CBA, if you win the Cy Young, it ups your minimum salary. And the kind of people think that's kind of like the Corbin Burns rule, because he was on a minimum contract and won the Cy Young, and there's bonuses for different things, and apparently instead of making like $800,000, he would be making like $6.8 million this year. To which I'm sure the Brewers are like, oh.
He would be under the old CBA, you're saying?
I don't know if I think poor Corbin was just a year too soon. I don't think he gets any of that. I think it starts next year. Like, you have to win the stuff this year to qualify for the bonuses next year.
And how frequently would a pitcher on a minimum salary be winning a Cy Young anyway?
Well, if you can't get, if you win it in your first 5 years, chances are you're going to be on a minimum salary. Okay. So. Oh, yeah. I think it would have been more fun, more festive had the Brewers started Corbin Burnson at pitcher today instead of Corbin Burns. Dun, 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 dun. We've seen him. He's got baseball chops. Good old Roger Dorn.
That's true. Yeah, Roger Dorn. Yeah, I missed the obvious baseball reference. I go right to LA Law. I go to the origin story.
In the Major League Movie Deep Dive, which is also a podcast on this fine podcast network.
Listen to it. It's a good one, kids.
You will find out that there's a key double in the playoff game that Roger Dorn hits. And the shot they use is actually Corbin. He was very proud of himself. He smoked
got a hold of one with a wood bat.
And the thing he joked about later was he was just glad he remembered to run. He's like, because you're up there, you're swinging, and you're just waiting to hit a good one. And a lot of times an actor will ruin the take by getting a hold of one, but they don't run. And then they're like, well, we can't use that, or at least we can't use a good shot of it because you just stood there watching it. You're supposed to be playing a game, and Corbin apparently got a hold of it and took off. And so the shot you see, they also said that the Dennis Haysbert actually hit a couple of those home runs.
Really?
Yes.
Big man.
Now they may have exaggerated the distance on a couple of them because Serrano was supposed to hit the ball so far, but they said there's at least 2 home runs in the movie that Dennis actually hit. That's pretty. I
have to assume Dennis Haysbert at least played high school baseball. It's not easy. It's not an easy thing to do, even if you're naturally
and of course,
athletic.
famously, Charlie Sheen took steroids.
Is that true?
Yes.
That tracks.
And the only thing they cheated with Charlie was in some of the shots they moved the mound up. I think it was only when they shoot him from behind the catcher, because you can't really tell. And then the ball gets on the batter faster. But he really could throw. But he decided he wanted to. He claims he was thrown in the 80s. I don't know.
Making a few trips from Hollywood.
Charlie's pharmaceutical cabinet is pretty.
Well, I'm wondering if he ever was compelled to make a few trips from Hollywood up the coast to Oakland to hang out in the athletics clubhouse.
What year was it? Yeah, right. Because that traveling show hadn't gone to St. Louis yet. So.
Right. Wait till they came to Anaheim, I guess.
Was that the movie? There's a Charlie Sheen movie. I don't think it was that one, because I think it was. he was having girls were coming in to spend a little time with him, and they were passing each other on the highway. That couldn't have been Milwaukee because it's too big. They wouldn't notice each other. Yeah.
Oh, you mean on the set? I'm sorry.
No, coming to visit him on the shoot. I forget. Maybe it might have been like Young Guns. They were out in the middle of nowhere. And I suppose the girls were seeing each other as they were driving by. Like they would see the car coming at them and be like, "That son of a bitch! I know that's for Charlie."
And just to fill anyone who may have missed that particular deep dive, or I think we also brought it up before, that was, of course, those scenes that you see in Major League that purportedly take place in Cleveland Municipal Stadium were in fact filmed in a hot-ass summer at Milwaukee County Stadium. So all those dudes were hanging out up there. And
it was because Ohio was a union state, and it would cost twice as much to shoot in the actual. They only did exteriors, and then famously the scene where Jake he thinks he's alone, and it's right before the opener, like the day before, and he stands at home plate and he does a little play-by-play, and he swings an imaginary bat. And he starts to run the bases, and he turns around, and Willie and Ricky are standing there going like, "Woo, you got all of that one." That one's actually that was when they were shooting the scenic stuff in Cleveland. Otherwise, they never took a full crew because it would cost
too expensive. Cleveland, Ohio, that's Rust Belt.
Major League 2, it's they're in Baltimore.
If they shoot in Baltimore.
Yeah. Camden apparently filled in for the Jake.
Even though Peter Angelo's famous pro-labor, well, maybe that wasn't an issue for them. Pro-labor owner.
Yeah. Then you, of course, know that to bring this movie stuff back to the Cubs, Pete Crow Armstrong.
Right, the son, the result of the Sheryl Crow, Lance Armstrong tryst from so many years ago.
Yep. Or his parents were both actors. They were both on Heroes together, but his mom played Timothy Busfield's. She played the mother of the kid who managed the Twins in Little Big League, who then dated Timothy Busfield. That's Pete Crow Armstrong's mom.
For real?
Yeah. So who knew? She got to pretend to be the mother of a major league manager, and she really is the mother of a guy who might be a major league outfielder. Right,
and the character herself was married to a person, the actor, of course, who someday could play a Chicago Sun-Times columnist. Right. So it all comes full circle.
Yeah. That's great. All right, so if you've made it this far, you're like, are they ever going to spin the wheel?
Congratulations.
They're talking about movies.
They've already talked about Major League. Yeah, we know. It was shot in Milwaukee.
So you can sign up for the Pointless Exercise newsletter at pointlessexercise.com, and you can, of course, sign up for this fine podcast there as well. So last week we got to relive the glory days of the 1995 Cubs, a team that I'm sure the 2022 Cubs have emulated themselves after. Just hang on by for dear life.
It tracks.
At the end of the season.
That Cubs team did win their opener in Cincinnati, and they did not get eliminated till the second to last day. So far, that's the track. That's the course we're on.
Yep.
It seems pretty obvious.
It's going to be a very exciting summer in Chicago with our exciting baseball team. So we've got. So you said last week we were halfway.
Yeah.
Or was last week halfway plus one?
Yeah, 17 weeks in, 15 weeks to go. 15 weeks. 17
weeks
seasons in, 15 seasons to go.
We still have a lot of the 80s on this.
8.
On this wheel. And not a lot of 90s. Only 2 years in the 90s are left, 93 and 90. So let's spin the wheel and see what exciting Cub team we're going to remember today. I'm going to guess it's one in the 80s, just for the odds of it. And I'm looking pretty good as it stops.
Oh, boy.
1982. This would be the second Cub team that I actually remember.
Excellent. I look forward to some of the start digging in that. I don't know if it's cerebral cortex or wherever your memory is to flesh out a few, because that's. Yeah.
All right. So as always, we start. You were right off the top of your head. 5 fun facts about the 1982 Cubs.
Trumpets glare as we usher in a whole new era in Chicago. Tribune Company ownership, and more significantly, Dallas Green, the general manager. Fact number 1: on opening day in Cincinnati, newly acquired Cubs second baseman Bump Wills hits a home run on the second pitch of the season. Did I say that was off of Mario Soto? It was in Riverfront.
Was it a changeup?
Was it?
Didn't he only throw changeups?
I don't know. He was pretty good for a while, but Bump was ready for him. He
was famous.
Famous
for the changeup.
That day would also be the first time that former White Sox announcer Harry Carey would be heard announcing a Cubs game. It would also, I'm just going to focus it on this. We'll get it out of the way. There's a lot that happened in 82 that really set the course for some interesting stuff. But fact number 4, also the debut at third base, Ryne Sandberg, newly acquired. A lot of newly acquired people. And I'm just going to say trivia for all you trivia mavens out here might know this answer. For the first time since sometime in the mid-'70s, Rick Reuschel was not the opening day starter in Cincinnati, but it was in fact the man for whom Rick Reuschel had been traded from the Yankees, Doug Bird, who would get the victory in a rain-shortened opener. And we'll just start there and guys go chronological or whatever, but opening day. Hey, today's opening day, right?
So we're going to do all 162.
Right. I do have a memory of the second game of the season, and then maybe we'll let the chips fall. There are a lot of comebacks. Fergie, I mean, we'll get to them all. I'll let you order it around.
Oh yeah, let's start with you might as well start with the opener.
I'm going to tell you that I was 10. So what would I be? I think it was a 4th grade. What were you? You were a year behind me. So I was already able to coax a day off of school. I was a good student. I was never sick. So my parents would help let that one slide. And so I was excited because I'm an idiot kid. Cubs are coming off consecutive absolute ass seasons. We covered 1980 when they lost 98 games and fired their first year manager after half the season. And then 81 was arguably worse. And yet it didn't deter a young Michael Donahue. Part of that, my optimism, aside from just the natural ignorant optimism that we have when you start the season, was that the aforementioned changes. Even my dad was excited. There was such a malaise there in the late 70s and whatnot. And, since it had been a decade since the DeRocher era Cubs, there was a disinterested Wrigley ownership that really had run its course. And so Tribune comes in and they came in guns a-blazing. We've talked so much about these 90s teams, which was a different, what I kind of refer to as a Tribune 2, a second sort of a shift fundamental in how they ran things, but they came in pretty strong and it was exciting. So we had the big free agent signings. Fergie comes back after, being gone for 8 or 9 years. They signed Bill Campbell. The Cubs are making free agent signings, right away, and Dallas fucking dealing. So in 80, it was exciting. They show up on opening day. They got the blue pajama tops. Like that's new. They prior to that, they had the light blue, dark pinstripe uniforms. And
this is an awful uniform.
Which ones? The pajama tops?
No, they're not great. But The light blue,
the Billy
pictures
Buckner
were
ones,
terrible.
right? I always think of Billy Buckner with those ones.
I'm anti powder blue.
Powder blue.
If you also wear, I don't like powder blue pants. Like, I think a good look is the Royals have a nice powder blue jersey, but they wear them with either their grays or with the gray pants or the white pants, and it looks nice. The powder blue pants are ridiculous. It's a leisure suit, and then the Cubs with the pinstripes made it even worse.
Yeah, So they ditched those. Doug Bird shows up. Bump Wills shows up. These are all new acquisitions. They've got these blue tops, so that's everything's exciting. And again, I'm a kid. I'm staying home from school, and I'm in full geek mode already at 10. I've got some sort of a cassette recorder, and I'm already so into the game. I've learned how to keep score. I'm gonna fucking do my own play-by-play, even though Harry Carey's about to do his first Cubs game. But I just, I was so into it. I'm pressing record, and I'm like, here we are, first pitch by Soto, it's a ball. And then, I criticize professional broadcasters today who have horrible home run calls. Like they're somehow caught off guard. But I got to tell you, there's 10-year-old Huey doing the call. Here's the 1-0 from Soto, and Wills swings and knocks it out. And I just froze. I was like, I couldn't even make the call. And then I'm like, what the fuck am I doing? I should be listening to Harry Carey. He just got here. I'm like, and I ditched the recording and listened to Harry for the rest of the game.
Oh, that's too bad. 'Cause I was hoping that you had the recording and we were going to play clips of it.
It was the 1-0 from Soto. Will swings and it's a drive, and I'm going out of my. I wasn't yelling or screaming. I was just like, this can't be happening. He's actually hit a home run on the first.
Did you do a pregame show too? Because if this was the opener, if the opener was in Cincinnati in 1982, this was the first game of the season.
It was,
and they had the stupid
100%.
Parade. And they did all this stuff because Cincinnati, to baseball openers, was basically the Iowa caucuses. They had just declared that they got to go first every time, and they threw a fit when Major League Baseball deigned to
sometime in the mid-90s,
send them on the road or schedule them or tell them you got to go at 1 o'clock because the Yankees are going first. And they
sometime in the mid to late
90s,
they lost that sometime mid to the late 90s. Maybe Marge Schott expressing impatience at a dying John McSherry accelerated that in 96. But I know that in 94, for the first time ever, there was a Sunday night lifter. It was still in Cincinnati, but it was the Cardinals Reds. They were losing their grip on that by the mid 90s. But you are absolutely right. They had this stupid ass tradition for a century or whatever. It was based on some argument they were the oldest continuous league, but I don't believe that the Cincinnati Reds go as far back to 1876 like the Cubs do. It's some nebulous argument, whatever. But it is a fact that Bump Wills. Without even having to worry, without having internet to see what other games are going on, having to worry about any of that, you knew it was the only game going on that day. And so it was the second pitch of the season, newly acquired Cubs second baseman Bump Wills hits it out of the park. And I did do a pregame show, by the way, because my dad used to work at Zenith, although he didn't in 1982. So, I had a garage full of Zenith televisions that I would dish out and do my own version of the leadoff man.
So, like a video wall in the garage, all tuned one of 4 channels.
A Danley garage, no less.
So Doug Bird, he went 7 innings, allowed only 5 hits. He walked 2. How many do you think he struck out in 7 innings?
You're laughing, so I'm going to say 3?
No, 1.
Okay.
So he was, ground ball, pitching to contact, moving along. The only 2 other Cubs pitched because the game ended in the 8th. But Lee Smith was the setup man, and he pitched 2/3 of an inning. He gave up a run, and then Willie Hernandez got the save.
Okay. I don't know if they had a clearly defined closer going in. I do know that Bill Campbell was one of the big signings. It was exciting, and he'd been around 6 or 7 years with the Twins and Red Sox, and he was one of the, that early crop of, closers. But Smith would eventually make it clear. I think Smith had his greatest statistical season in 82.
So this, for people who are like, well, Lee Elia was the manager, so you guys going to play the rant?
Nope,
the rant's a year off.
Yeah, we're not doing the rant. That's 83, baby.
1983. This was Lee on his best behavior for the whole season.
Yes.
Swearing and chewing out guys. doing that.
Yeah, I was excited, like coming home from school. Here you'd have to listen to WBM. I heard the Cubs hired a new manager. And my mom was trying to tell me, hey, he used to play for the White Sox. But who is it? I think he may have even played for the Cubs, but didn't know who he was when they hired him. But
so Bump homered on the first pitch of the season.
It was first pitch.
Yes. Okay. Much like Ian Happ would years later for the Cubs. But another Cub homered on the second pitch of the second inning. Do you know who that was?
Was it new Cub Keith Moreland?
It was Keith Moreland.
Somehow
Cubs were ambushing, as Jim DeShays would say. They were ambushing Mario Soto.
Right, and there's Don Zimmer in the third base box. I mean, there might have been the seeds of some animosity that would fester 2 years later, but. And of course, Zimmer. No, I'm sorry. I scratched that out of my ass. Zimmer came in with Fry in '84. Yep. So scratch that from there. I don't know who the Cubs' third base coach would have been, because Joey was finally sent packing. Good old Joey Amalfitano. Everything was new. Everything was brand new in '82. So it was, even as a 10-year-old kid, it was. Everybody was kind of excited. Building a new tradition was this slogan that Dallas Green had ushered in, and. Got off to a good start.
So, of course, Ryne Sandberg made his first. It was not his major league debut. He had played a few games for the Phillies in '81. But he made his Cub debut that day. And he famously got off to a red-hot start.
I'm not sure you know what the meaning of red hot is.
Of course I do. He was... let's see, he was...
He didn't get a hit for about a week.
He was 0 for his first, at least 19. And then, then he got one hit. Not sure which at bat in that game.
It was at Wrigley. I remember seeing it on TV.
And let's see, he got him, so he was 1 for his first 30, at least. And he then got 2 hits in a game on the 17th of April, and then he just took off. And he was actually from then on.
Probably give a little bit of credit to Lee Elia for just sticking with him. We were all rooting for him. He was a good-looking kid. The Cubs, everything was, like I said, everything was new. He was new. He looked like a ball player, and he proved to be. It took a few years till he did become a superstar, but he felt like he was going to be serviceable. He was probably hitting into some bad luck. But I remember how excited Harry was when he finally got a hit.
Yeah, so after going 1 for 30, he then went 15 for his next 49, a 306 with a 469 slug, and got his batting average, which had been an exciting 0.33. He finished April about where he always finished April, at 2.03.
That's actually might have been pretty good for him.
A notoriously slow starter.
As it proved to be, yeah.
One of the things I always loved about it was like, these guys, it's tough. They get here, they got to hit in cold weather. It's like, isn't that what's going to be like in the playoffs?
Although Sandberg performed in the playoffs,
yeah,
though.
he was fine, and it's different. It
sucks.
It's a dry cold.
I didn't go to the game today. I originally was. I was going to have my cataracts, and I got it pushed back, and I decided that's fine. I'm not, I already gave up my ticket, and I was content even while following the game and hearing the excitement. Cold as fuck out there, and it's like you wonder about the guys playing out there. It is different between April and October. If it's like this in October, there is something different, even if it's 40 degrees.
Yeah.
Well,
unless you're, remember Jorge Soler dressed for the playoffs.
Yes. My dad still talks about that.
Like Ralphie's little brother in the Christmas Story. He couldn't put his arms down.
Hope he doesn't die for a ball. He's not going to be able to get up. Yeah. I did say that I have a memory of the second game, and I have to bring it up just because it's going to invoke a name that we've rarely mentioned. I'm in every game. Second game was a night game, so I go to school the next day or 2 days later, and I just remember 2 names from the second game, and it's not going to be in Baseball Reference, but the starting pitcher, again, new guy, recovering alcoholic, Dickie Knowles.
Yep.
And Dickie Knowles, I think if he was known for anything, but then he had a World Series ring. He had pitched for Dallas Green when Green was the Phillies manager in 1980. He pitched in the World Series and got attention for apparently throwing a little too close to George Brett. And, it got a little tense in the World Series. At some point in the game, Dickie Knowles threw a little bit too close to Reds legend Paul Householder.
Yes, I see it right here.
Bench is almost cleared, and that's it. We can move on from April, but
the Reds. This is perfect too. So the opener, they had 51,000 fans in beautiful Riverfront Stadium. Game 2, 10,000. Well, we're averaging 30,000 a game. Yeah, you are. But the Reds had some interesting names. How about this? Johnny Bench playing third base.
Yep.
And replaced late in the game by Wayne Krenchicki. Paul Householder was in right field. Bruce Berenier was the starting pitcher.
Future Met in '84.
Herman Barranca pinch hit in the game.
Got nothing.
Just a lot of good names.
Paul Householder was also one of the 3 guys on one of the early Topps future prospects. I want to say the '81 set, the ones with the ball caps.
So pitched so Dickey went 5 2/3, 4 hits, only gave up 2 runs. He also struck out 1. So through 2 starts, the Cubs starting pitchers had 2 strikeouts. He was relieved by famous Cub relievers Dick Tidrow, Bill Campbell, Willie Hernandez, and the most famous of them all, Herman Segelke. Or Siegel, how do you even say Herman's last name?
Can't help you there, Andy.
I don't know. How long did Herman... I don't know why you don't remember Herman. Herman's career consisted of 3 games.
Yeah. I think I went to bed.
He was a first-round draft pick of the Cubs in 1976.
Wow. Yeah, I would have gone to bed probably, so I would have missed that for sure. So, but I knew all those other names, obviously. I forgot that Dick Tidrow was still there in '82.
Now, I don't know if I've talked about I have an inexplicable hatred for Ken Landreau. I don't know why. I never liked him.
Because he had an X at the end of his name, maybe?
He was 1 pick ahead of Herman Segelke, because otherwise I'm sure he would have been the Cubs' number 1 pick. Taken right after Herman, Steve Trout by the White Sox.
Would be a Cub a year from the 82
listen to this.
season.
This is a who's who. The 15th pick in the first round, 1976, Leon Durham.
My guy from the Cardinals.
16th pick, Pat Tabler of the Yankees, also an 82 Cub.
Let's pause right. We got time for a quick Pat Tabler story?
Yeah, because he fits because he's on this team.
He was supposed to make the team, but for the last minute acquisition of Bump Wills, which apparently pissed Pat Tabler off. So if it wasn't for Dallas Green, I don't even know who he got for Bump Will or who he gave up for Bump Wills. But Tabler, of course, was a hot Yankee prospect, as you just sort of confirmed. At least he started off as a highly touted first-round draft pick, and I remember it was a rumor for a while. I remember my brother talking up Pat Tabler. It was making the rounds that the Cubs might get this Pat Tabler sometime during the '81 season. And it finally went through after a week of everyone talking about it years before the internet. Word was around town that Pat Tabler, this hot prospect, would be with the Cubs. And they did get him, and he may have even come up in '81, but in '82, everyone thought he was going to, at least be on the roster, if not the starter. But they didn't want to, they had Junior Kennedy. And of course, when you got Junior Kennedy, do you remember Junior Kennedy, Andy?
I remember the name. I don't really remember.
There are a lot of Kennedys playing baseball around then, it seemed. The Cubs' former general manager the year before was Bob Kennedy, and his son was Terry, who was a catcher for the Cardinals and played against the Cubs in both of their NLCS of the 80s. But Junior Kennedy, who, and since I've gone down this rabbit hole of the second baseman and mentioned Junior Kennedy, we'll just remember at one point, it might have been in the '82 season, so it'd be relevant. Could have been '83, but I think it was '82 when Bill Buckner almost got into fisticuffs with Gary Carter when
God bless Bill Buckner.
Yes, and Buckner actually took his glove and kind of gave like what hockey players do, kind of shoved it in Carter's face when players were kind of all around them. And I just remember the strangest thing. I remember this Steve Stone and Harry's like, "Whoa, what's going on?" And then Steve Stone, Harry, I wouldn't want to mess with Junior Kennedy. He's a street fighting man. And it's like, what the hell is that? Like, it's a Rolling Stones song. I knew that. I'm like, so Junior Kennedy is like what? Some like hillbilly? He's got like a switchblade in his back pocket. I don't know like what was meant by that. Apparently, Junior Kennedy, according to Steve Stone, some real fucking badass. But he was just a skinny dude in a mustache and just an average second baseman that rode out the 81 season. I don't think he was with him before 81, but
from Irvine, California. Also,
okay,
also a first round pick.
Really?
Yeah.
14, was he a Cardinal?
14 years before. He picked by the Orioles and played for the Reds and the Cubs.
Okay, Reds, I think, is where he probably got most of his playing time before the Cubs. Apparently stabbed a man to death in some 4 a.m. bar. I don't know why Steve Stone was so freaked out about Junior Kennedy, but going into the opener, the Bump Wills trade happened right before opening day.
You want to know who Bump was traded for?
In just one second, I'm just going to say that Junior was going to be the opening day second baseman, and Pat Tabler had made the roster until this trade, in which the Cubs dealt who for Bump Wills? I'm not going to guess.
Paul Seymour.
Yeah.
For not just for Bump and a player named later. Oh, it was in cash. It was a player named later who turned out to be Paul Mirabella and Bump and some cash for Paul Seymour.
I remember Paul Mirabella from my Topps cards, Toronto Blue Jay left-hander, I want to say.
So now, Bump Wells, of course, the son of borderline Hall of Famer and former all-time stolen base leader, Maury. And he was also, Bump also, for everybody was first-round draft picks back then. Went to Arizona State, 6th pick of the draft by the Rangers, and had played for the Rangers for 5 years, before coming to the Cubs. And he would play for the Cubs in 1982, and then
Japan. He went to Japan after that. The first year that I collected Topps cards was 78, which was the cursive one. 79, I didn't collect as much before I really got into it in 80, but in 79, I actually, as a 7-year-old, opened up a pack and there was a Bump Wills trading card in which it said that he played for the Blue Jays, although he was clearly, in a batting stance wearing a Rangers uniform. So that always, I remember my brother saying, "Oh, that could be a valuable card," before I, wrapped it in a rubber band in which it's still been ensconced for the last 50 years.
Bump played for 2 seasons for the Hankyu Braves. You're welcome. Where he played with such notables as Kazuhiko Ishimini, Yoshihiro Iwamoto, Kosuke Fukudome, Tomohiro Kinoshita.
What? Oh, you're joking, right?
Yeah, I just worried because Kosuke's so old.
Well, I started to wonder if
that he
I know, but
also on the I slid that one in.
I was wondering if somehow Bump Wills was this sage old that ended up, but I suppose we would have heard about that, and he was playing as a 50-year-old.
25 years later, when Kosuke came to play for the Cubs.
Right, word would have gotten back to the States.
Now, it has been 14 years since he debuted for the Cubs. Kosuke still playing in the Japanese League.
So there you go.
Okay, so the 82 Cubs, the bones are starting to be assembled for the 84 Cubs. Jody Davis is the catcher. Of course,
not the opening day catcher though, because Dallas Green was really trying to see if Keith Moreland could still catch. He couldn't.
Yeah, he couldn't.
I was a Jody fan in that department.
Keith Moreland listed as utility on Baseball Reference for that season. But Jody, he ended up catching 130 games for the Cubs. Buckner, who would get traded for Dennis Eckersley.
Not for 2 more years, though.
Right. Sandberg was there, although he's playing third instead of second. And that brings up my whole theory as a kid. Because, the Cubs couldn't find a third baseman. They kept looking, and of course, they got Ron Say, and that allowed them to move Sandberg to second. where I guess he was fine defensively at second base. I guess he was okay.
All-time
I guess it
great.
kind of worked out. I remember as a kid thinking, though, like, he clearly would have been a Gold Glove third baseman. He just would have been.
Sure.
It wouldn't have been easier at the time to find a second baseman, a competent second baseman. It probably would have been.
Well, especially because I always felt like Sandberg was the cream of the crop, but it felt like during the 80s, and this is a little bit more after 82, but and none of these guys would be memorable now, so it doesn't mean they suck. They're all kind of pretty decent, but you might remember like Bill Doran of the Astros. Maybe they did suck. I don't know. Ron Oster of the Reds, who probably played in those first two games against the Cubs in 82. Johnny Ray of the Pirates. The Mets had guys that sucked, but were frustratingly like you get in your nerves, like Wally Backman and Tim Tuffle, who broke your hand with a home run ball, I believe. But right, and then Phillies had Juan Samuel, who was rookie of the year in '84.
I can see the ball from here. There it is.
Yeah, the Tim Tuffle ball. Juan Samuel of the Phillies in '84.
Bartlett Giamatti. I can read the name.
I remember thinking that the NL East, which is the division in which the Cubs resided for years, certainly in the 80s, had a like above average second baseman in general. So to your point about had Sandberg stayed at third, was there enough of an abundance? And, Dallas Green was certainly shrewd enough, probably could have plugged somebody in there. But on the other hand, I got to tell you, I
just played Dave Owen there.
I have to tell you how taken aback I am at how cynical a 10, 11-year-old Andy Dolan was at Ron. I loved having Ron. I know he was a former Dodger, but the Dodgers won. As annoying as they were, we rehashed, Bill Russell and like Garvey and all that team. I didn't really hate Say like those guys.
I didn't hate Say.
I knew he was old and bad, but like I didn't know. I don't know how and he did. He contributed when they did win the division. And he was. I mean, he was kind of washed up. The Dodgers cut him loose after 12 years or something. But yeah, that's an interesting alternate history because I do think there seemed to be a lot of good second basemen around then that they could have plugged in.
Let's see. Yeah,
Leon
Durham was playing right field.
Yeah, I was going to say another oddity was that Sandberg was playing third, and Leon Durham, who most people probably associate as a first baseman, was an all-star.
Yeah, he had a great
outfielder that year. That's part of the reason I loved him.
22 homers, 90 RBIs, hit 312, a 388 on base, and a 521 slug.
How many stolen bases?
28. How many times did he get caught?
15?
14.
Okay.
Sandberg stole 32, and he got caught 12 times. It was kind of borderline. Bump
good back then.
Bump stole 35, got caught 10, so that's acceptable. And Bill Buckner stole 15 bases, was only caught 5 times.
Crafty. Probably a couple delayed steals, maybe.
Like 15 of them, probably. Here's the best one. Keith Moreland. He got caught stealing 6 times. How many successful stolen bases do you think he had?
I'm going to say 3.
He had none. He was 0 for 6.
What the hell, Keith? Those must have been like 2 outs. I'm wondering because Keith was he was a pretty smart ball player.
I'm sure they were just botched hit and runs. Poor Keith.
Oh, that's it.
I'm sure he got picked off 6 times. He just took off for second. Like, screw it. I'll just go to second.
Botched hit and runs.
I'll get a caught stealing instead of a pickoff. It'll look better in the box score.
I think you nailed it.
Boy, the Cubs were running fools back then. Larry Boa, 8 of 11. He got caught
also
3 times.
Newly acquired.
Steve Henderson, successful 6 times in 11 attempts. It's not worth it, Steve. You got to stop. Gary Woods was hitting 500. He was 3 for 6 stolen bases. Jerry Morales won 1 for 3. Junior Kennedy, the aforementioned 1 for Kennedy, 1 for 5.
So today,
as a team, the Cubs stole 132 bases, got caught 70 times. They would have literally been better not trying to steal a single base. Also.
But I think that's largely. I mean, the Cubs are not that good of a team. Some teams probably rated much higher, but for the most part, that just is emblematic of how different it is today. Raga got caught stealing, and I'm thinking how rare it is to like the attempt of a stolen base is. And even rarer seems to get caught. Like,
no doubt. It's when we were kids. Everybody ran a lot. It was just a thing, and it took a long time for some egghead to crunch the numbers and be like, you need to be successful at least 2/3 of the time, or over the course of the season, you're not doing yourself any favors. That wasn't they didn't think that.
I thought it was 75%, but yeah.
Oh, you're probably right.
Either what, but you're right. There's a point where the risk isn't worth the reward isn't worth the risk. I had to look up Steve Henderson because I just wanted to confirm that he was in fact acquired for Dave Kingman, and yes, I'm correct. That was a 1-on-1. So we went to great lengths about Kingman. Yeah, so he was. Henderson was actually, he might have been a first round pick, right? I just had him up for a second. I want to say the Reds drafted him, but again, like you say, every
fifth. He was a 5th round pick of the Reds.
All right.
From Prairie View A&M. Here's an interesting story. So Larry Cox was a backup catcher. He caught 2 games for the 82 Cubs. He also he's more famous. He was the last guy cut on the 1980 Miracle on Ice, the Olympic hockey team. I'm thinking it might have been a different Larry Cox. But I think it's the same guy.
A major league catcher.
He was 34 years old in 1982. So you think there was a 32-year-old trying to make the 80 Olympic team? Probably.
Larry Cox had a mustache. That's all. I'm pretty sure.
It's a big part of the movie Miracle because, of course, Herb Brooks has to cut him, and Herb most famously had been the final cut of the 1960 U.S. Olympic hockey team, and they also went on to win the gold medal. And there was poor Herb, and Herb liked to tell the story that he watched the gold medal game at home on his couch with his dad, and then the Americans won, and Dad got up and walked out and said, "Well, it looks like they cut the right guy." Wow. Thanks, Dad.
That can't be real.
No, it probably was. Herb was a prick. I'm sure his dad was a prick, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Fergie, he came back and he won 14 games for the bad 73 and 89 Cubs.
Mediocre especially compared to the last 2 seasons. The ship was headed in the right direction, and that's
still,
not just.
39-year-old Fergie winning 14 games. He lost 15, but he had a 3.15 ERA.
It was set up too where Doug Bird, as I said, was the opening day starter. Fergie got the assignment at the home opener that year, and it was pretty cool. Like, all right, so there's like a segment of Cub fans, you and me, that our only direct experience with Fergie Jenkins is Fergie the second, right? And he was still a good pitcher. He started the home opener, and then, as it turned out, he was the opening day starter in '83, which we can revisit that when we talk about it. He got his 3,000th strikeout in '82, which is kind of cool. I stayed up late, even though. So what do we say in '80? So I'm like in 4th grade. Gary Templeton was his victim.
All right, San Diego, right?
Yeah, I got to stay up late. Any Cubs game I could stay up late, but I remember staying up for that one. So Fergie got his 3,000th strikeout, and so it was fun because you'd hear stories. Like your older brother might have remembered old Fergie. Certainly, my older brothers, my dad did. Everyone knows historically. You talk about Fergie Jenkins as a Cub. We're talking about this incredible run that he had from between 67 to 73. But there's this carved out, there's this section of Cub fans like us that got to see him and kind of enjoy him on his own terms, which were almost like watching Alan Page for the Bears compared to the Vikings. But it was cool. I kind of learned about the history, and he was still an effective pitcher. He won 14 games for a 73-win team.
So here's an interesting. We talked about how the game is different. Stolen bases are different than it used to be. The other thing that's different is strikeouts. Players back then didn't like to strike out. Players now don't care. But every pitching staff now is full of guys who strike out well more than a batter an inning. The Cubs had 15 guys pitch for them in 1982. And I guess a really small number. The current Cubs, have 14 guys on their pitching staff on opening day. The 82 Cubs used 15 pitchers all season. How many of those 15 pitchers struck out more than a batter an inning?
Lee Smith probably. 2. None?
Not a goddamn one of them.
Not even Lee, Arthur.
In 1,447 innings, the 82 Cubs struck out 764 guys. Just to compare that, Nolan Ryan struck out more guys than that by himself that year.
So it wasn't necessarily a sign of the time. Well, Ryan himself was an anomaly.
I just looked up. Nolan struck out 250 guys. So he struck out a third of the entire number that the Cubs struck out.
Still an anomaly.
The Astros struck out almost 200 more guys than the Cubs that year.
Well, Ryan and Carlton and Seaver themselves represented a shift in strikeout rates because they as a triumvirate basically stormed Walter Johnson's record all around the same time. So
yeah, the Cubs were 10th in the 12-team National League in strikeouts.
Pitcher strikeouts.
Batter strikeouts, they were 8th.
Well, they had Billy Buckner. Yeah, they probably held their own.
They were 8th. They were bottom half. Bill Buckner, in 709 plate appearances, 657 at-bats, struck out 26 times.
Yeah.
Holy crap.
And yet,
I'm always amazed to see that.
Right. Well, I love when you bring it up, but then also Buckner, which kind of blew my mind a little bit when we talk about 1980, might not have had as high of an on-base percentage as we would assume. I don't know what was it in 82.
It was 342. He wasn't even. Bump Wills had a higher on base, 347.
Oh, Bump got on base.
Yeah, Bump 272, 347, 377. He had 35 stolen bases.
I remember one of my friend's dad grouping Bump Wills and Glenn Mother Hubbard as just being absolute statues as defense. So because you look at those numbers, they're not terrible offensively. And maybe Bump Wills just couldn't play second base. He seemed sort of rotund. He didn't look anything. I mean, he didn't look a whole lot like his dad. He had I don't know.
He must have been fast.
Well, that's true. That's true. Yeah, he stole bases, but he was I don't know what it was. I don't know why Bump Wills 724 OPS in 1982 for a second baseman ain't horrible.
So the guy who had the low on base percentage for as good a year as he had. I mean, we know he had off to a terrible start with Sandberg. He only had a 312 on base that year. But even after starting 1 for 30, he hit 271. He only slugged 372. Of course, that's before Jim Fry told him start hitting home runs, and then he did.
That's right.
That's the dullest story that Sandberg tells 14 times a year. And he scored 103 runs, by far and away the most on the team. Buckner was second with 93, and then nobody was anywhere close. Leon scored 84 times. Poor Leon could only drive himself in 22 times, and nobody else could drive him in.
Part of the reason Leon Durham is my all-time favorite Cub is because, this is really getting into, our sweet spot as fans, as little kids, when there's nothing else that matters in the world, pretty much. You don't have, too many concerns, is that Leon, because of the rule in which you have to have at least one all-star, was the Cubs all-star, only all-star. As a younger kid, I remember the excitement when Bruce Sutter would just baffle these American League hitters who'd never seen his pitch before, while pitching for the Cubs. So there was always Cub excitement in the All-Star game, but Durham kind of represented my first experience. So here's a guy that we got, and he looks like a badass, and we traded Suter for him, and he's pretty good. He's a left-handed hitter, and he's fast, and he's seems kind of unique, and boom, he's the guy that we get to watch in the All-Star game. Yeah.
Leon was an All-Star twice. He was also an All-Star in 83. Although he only played 100 games in 83.
So he must have missed a lot. Last half of that season. Half,
yeah. Funny man, Jay Johnstone, only played in 98 games, only batted 269 times. He had 10 home runs for the 82 Cubs. 10 homers, 43 RBIs. He walked 40 times, only struck out 41. Let's see. It was his 16th season in the big leagues. He was 36 years old.
And he would be on the Cubs.
Yeah, he was through 84, where he famously Jim Fry hated him.
When the Cubs got Davey Lopes, they forced Johnstone out, former teammate with the Dodgers. I think
they left him off the playoff roster, and Dallas went and told him, "I want you in the clubhouse," and he appointed him shower coach. His job after the games was to point out the showers to the other players. That was how Dallas justified keeping Johnstone around. Fry had no sense of humor. And
Dallas was gruff too, but he was also real. So he kind of liked Johnstone.
Jay had played for him in Philly, and he had purposely brought him to the Cubs. In fact, Jay, did he? It's not black, but he tells a story in one of his many books. It must have been in '76. He played for the Phillies for a while, from '74 to '78. Then he went to the Yankees for a while.
I think the crossover with Green didn't become the manager till like late '78, I think. Yeah. Danny Ozark, but he was the farm director. So if Johnstone came up with the Phillies, then Green would actually have a very deep relationship.
He came up with the Angels and then played for the White Sox for many years.
Oh man, he was a
Dallas
total
knew him. Dallas liked him and wanted him on the team. Jay was. He was in the hunt to lead the National League in doubles one year with the Phillies. And in the last game of the year, he hit a ball that clearly could have been a triple, and he stopped at second because he wanted to add another double to this double total. He also claimed that the next year, the Phillies were out of it, and he didn't want, everybody just wanted to go home. And he got put in the lineup that day, and he's like, oh. So he got himself thrown out in the first inning and went home. Got a nice. Sammy Sosa.
Smart. All right, I'm done.
Yeah, but he had an excuse. He couldn't play. He didn't just skip a game. I'm sorry. The ump told me I have to go home. I'm going to go home.
I think it's probably a good point here in this podcast to maybe dive into like what Dallas Green's influence really was. Maybe if there are some listeners who don't really, didn't really live through it. Because you mentioned Jay Johnstone, and like that's a guy that like Green probably kind of targeted for reasons that were specific to Green. Like Green came in with a plan. I mentioned earlier this building a new tradition, which really sort of like upset certain members of the fan base. My dad not included. He was all fucking on board with, sick and tired of this, this absolute malaise that they were in. And Green came in with a lot of bluster. He was, coming from an organization with Philadelphia, which, he helped awaken after basically an entire 80-year existence of being absolute ass, and was, in fact, after rising through the farm system and developing lots of players that he would later manage when he got promoted as the field manager and led Philadelphia to their first ever World Series in 1980. Which was the culmination of just these players he developed, these players that he knew, and he himself, he was a lifelong Philly. He was from Delaware. He was drafted by the Phillies, but for a brief, embarrassing period at the end of his career when he had to serve up a home run to Jimmy Pearsall, in which Jimmy ran around the bases backwards, which I'm sure Green never forgot. He was a absolute lifelong Philadelphia Philly. And but the Cubs, with Tribune moving in, like I said, after this moribund franchise had really sort of bottomed out after 81, they came in with a lot of flash. They bought the team and they hired Green to run everything basically. And he came in, he answered the fucking call. Like he didn't, he didn't second guess, he didn't stumble. He didn't, have a shitty initial press conference like Jerry Angelo. Like he hit all the notes, but he did ruffle feathers. I mean, there's a segment of the fan base that was content, just like there has been today and in recent years, that, like the status quo, even though it's really not very inspiring. And, as a kid, of course, I didn't know what, a great team would be, across all of Chicago sports at this point. It was just, you root for the team that, that you live around and hope that lightning strikes. So Green comes in and he's got the swagger and he's got these connections with Philadelphia, and he deals our guy Mike Kroiko for Moreland. He deals, Ivan DeJesus to bring in a Boa and convince, Paul Owens, his successor in Philadelphia, to, give him this unheralded shortstop, Ryne Sandberg, that I believe Philadelphia had long-term plans for maybe Julio Franco at short or something. May have elected it, but whatever. Green got lucky there, but he also knew something about Sandberg. He picks up Bump Wills. He's wheeling and dealing. He's signing guys. Tribune gave him a checkbook. All of a sudden, the Cubs are players in free agency, which was not a thing under Wrigley ownership. And he brings back Fergie, he brings Bill Campbell, and so this is the first year. This is it. But the building the new tradition was a slogan that he brought. And he's plastered it onto the bleacher entrance outside of center field, and started to drop hints that lights would be necessary, and that also, I think, made certain people that were already sort of content a little bit anxious and eventually active. But it's exciting to think about. I've taken so much time over the last 20 years to give Dallas Green his due, but this was his maiden voyage, and it as mediocre as they turned out to be in '82, he definitely charted a course.
Yeah, there's the nonsense story, the retelling of the story that the Sandberg trade, that Ryne was like this prospect throw-in. It's like, no, Dallas didn't trade because he so had to have 37-year-old Larry Boa. I mean, he was willing to give up Avante Jesus to get Sandberg, and he needed a shortstop, and he got Boa.
Yeah, there's about a 5 or 6 year. Boa was the old ass, like you said. There's a 5 or 6 year difference between DeJesus and Boa, so that's kind of how I thought about it.
Because this would also be, if he was so committed to the great Larry Boa, this was also the year then he used his very first draft pick on the greatest Cub of all time, Shawon Dunston.
Still, the only time the Cubs have had the first pick in the amateur draft in our lifetime, or ever.
And there was nobody that went like in the top 5 that would have been a better player than Shawon.
No pitchers from Florida.
No, who managed to beat the Cubs like a drum every time he pitched against them his entire career.
Just not in '84, though.
No.
Yeah. Who else besides Gooden was in that draft? Just Gooden. Doesn't matter. It was a divisional rival. But that's not Green's fault. And Dunston was good, as you point out. And for a few years, he was really good.
Well, we just did a podcast where he basically was dragging the 95 Cubs down the stretch.
And he was kind of an old man by then.
Winning
That's
games
13 years later. He's 31 years old. Yeah, that's right. He was.
Well, I got to
that's the other thing that Dallas Green ushered in.
Thing is what happened in the draft that year.
We look it up. No, and it inspires some pretty funny names. But yeah, while you search for that, that was another exciting thing that happened in '82. Is the Cubs had the first pick in the draft, and they get to draft this 18-year-old kid out of Brooklyn that batted like .820 as a senior.
Well, the first pick was Shawon, and the second pick never played in the big leagues. The great Augie Schmidt out of the University of New Orleans, who got drafted by the Blue Jays.
College player.
Jimmy Jones, pitcher from Thomas Jefferson High School in Dallas, was the third pick by the Padres.
Didn't make it.
Brian Olkers was the fourth round pick by the Twins, or the fourth pick by the Twins. The fifth was Dwight Gooden. The sixth was Spike Owen of the Mariners.
Dave's brother.
Sammy Khalifa went seventh to the Pirates. Bob Kipper got picked by the Angels. Dwayne Ward.
I believe Bob Kipper, Andy. I believe Bob Kipper. I might be wrong. I apologize. I may have pitched for Kishwaukee College.
If he didn't sign, he might have, because he went to Aurora. He was from Aurora Catholic.
Yeah, he's definitely the guy that played for Kishwaukee. There you go, Bob. In case you listen, got your name checked. Not Bob Nepper, who was a very good pitcher. Bob Kipper.
Yeah, there's Bob Nepper. There was Al Nipper.
Yes.
Bob Kipper. Yeah, so Dwayne Ward was probably the best player other than Dwight and Shawon.
Dwayne Ward gets mentioned a week after the 1995 season, in which his name wasn't mentioned, but I want to say 95 was the year in which Dwayne Ward was trying to make a comeback as the Cubs closer, but couldn't make the team out of spring training. So
White Sox first pick that year, Ron Karkovice.
Parco.
They're a former Cub manager is in this first round.
Joe Girardi? No. Joe Girardi. No. He drafted by the Cubs, and he was.
Yep. If I tell you the team, it'll give it away.
Joe Girardi was not a Cubs manager. Duh. Sorry.
No, not yet. Anyway, who knows?
You said former, not future. Who is
the 25th pick of the first round? Dale Svaim.
Oh, boy.
And let's see, the only other, Franklin Stubbs to the Dodgers, Todd Worrell to the Cardinals, Sam Horn to the Red Sox.
I remember Sam Horn.
So, Cubs did fine with Shawon.
Yeah, they did.
They didn't draft Brian Olkers, at least.
Oh, my God. Wow, the top 5. Between Dunston and Gooden, it's all ass.
Just think how everything would have been different if the Twins had picked Gooden. He wouldn't have become a coke addict. He'd have been like addicted to like lutefisk or something.
Right.
He'd still be pitching.
When it comes to towing, seeing is believing. That's why Chevy Truck's advanced camera technology offers up to 8 available cameras for 14 unique views, so you can focus on the view that really matters. Chevrolet, together let's drive. Learn more about Chevy Trucks at Chevy.com. Safety or driver assistance features are no substitute for the driver's responsibility to operate the vehicle in a safe manner. Read the vehicle owner's manual for important feature limitations and information.
Hey, Atlanta. Say hello to Small Business Help from Apple. That's right. We're here to make starting and running your business simpler. From helping you choose the right devices to setting them up hassle-free, we can help you build your business in no time. Speak to a business expert and get the help you need at no cost whatsoever. At Apple, we're open for your small business. Go to apple.com/small business or visit an Apple store to learn more.
¿Hablas español?
Sprichst du Deutsch?
Kan du norsk?
If you've heard that sound from Babbel before, I bet you do. Babbel is the science-backed language learning app that actually works. With quick 10-minute lessons handcrafted by over 200 language experts, Babbel gets you on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. With over 16 million subscriptions sold and a 20-day money-back guarantee, just start speaking another language with Babbel. Right now, up to 55% off your Babbel subscription at babbel.com/Spotify podcast. Spelled BABBEL.com/Spotify podcast. Rules and restrictions may apply.
I'm pulling up the Cubs games, but I just remembered a game that we have to jump to so I don't forget. It's an epic game. And if we didn't discuss this, I'd be kicking myself. And it was a summer game. I'm going to find it. August probably. Late July, early August. Home game against the Dodgers.
Oh, is it the ridiculously long game?
21 innings.
Oh, yes. I have a story about this.
Good, we both do. All right, let's take our time with this. Anybody following at home can refer to the game that was played. Well, there's a 13-inning game earlier in the season against the Dodgers at Wrigley. But of course, this was in the days when the Dodgers would come to Chicago twice. And I would refer you to a game that it actually began. I don't know how this works. I think it began on Tuesday, August 17th. At Wrigley Field, 120, because every game began at 120, although 1982 may have been the year in which Dallas Green started sneaking in 305 games. Yeah, it's a Dallas Green invention, too. It also paved the way to night games, but also as a way to get maybe more workers from the loop to cut out of work a little bit early and actually call it a full day and still make most of the game.
The reason for the team-wise to do it was that Fridays tend to be first days after.
It wasn't just Fridays though.
Right, but they were pretty regularly with the 305s on Fridays, and that was to try to buy.
Because the Fridays morphed into a different thing in the 90s. That was a 220 start.
The 305s were meant to go to be right after they got back from a road trip, and they would have. It's about as late as they could start one without lights. And try to reasonably get in. They had a lot of suspended games because of that. It also, Lee Smith enjoyed the 305s because it was harder than hell to hit at 6 o'clock because it was getting dark in there.
Well, so I don't know then. That's a good point. This is like August 17th. I don't know. It doesn't say what time this game actually started, 120 or 305, unless there's other info. Time of game 6:10. That's hours. 6-hour game. But of course, not in one day.
It was probably a. Well, that's a good question.
Well, look at the number of innings. It could have started at 120. So yeah, I fact check. I assumed it was 120.
My memory serves that they didn't.
It was a Tuesday game,
It
beginning
ended
of the week.
relatively quickly, right, when they started up the next day.
Correct.
So yeah, I would
So
guess.
they played
I would
most
guess
of the
it was
innings.
probably I mean, they'd have been playing until like 8 o'clock.
But it was.
And even though you're like, well, it's summer, it's like that. It gets dark
shadows.
in there. Yeah, you can't. There's
You
not.
can't play
you don't have
after
direct
6:30.
light. You can't see shit.
Yeah, you got Lee Smith, who's still in his prime. In fact, I think he had a great year, but yeah, firing in. So, all right, a couple things on the first day on Tuesday, because this game was played over 2 days. Just spoiler alert: Wrigley didn't have lights, so if they don't get the game in, it gets suspended, which is a rule that you'd only see suspended games back then for Cubs games. Other games that get rained out or washed out or rain shortened. Only games at Wrigley Field would ever get suspended. What happened, and I'm going to find it so you don't have to. I know this happened on the Tuesday, late in the game, or maybe in extra innings. But Larry Baugh, with 1 or 2 outs, maybe one, on first base, with the Cubs a chance to win. So it's either in the 9th or at the end of the game. Takes off from first base, and our guy, Leon Durham, mashes one off the right field wall. Okay. And Boa comes all the way around the bases. What inning?
The bottom of the 8th.
It's just the 8th.
Yep,
all right, so not a walk-off. Yes. All right, could have been a normal game, but home plate umpire Eric Gregg can't fucking allow that. And he calls Larry Boa out at the plate. So it would not have been a walk-off, but it could have been a game winner because it's the bottom of the 8th, and it's the go-ahead run. Yep. And Boa, otherwise known for his calm, rational demeanor,
right.
Very, very chill guy. Of course not. Larry Bowa is one of the Hall of Fame red asses. So very predictably, completely explodes, jumps up, gets right into Eric Gregg's face, gets ejected, I'm sure. Can't confirm that. I don't know what happens with Elia comes out. It's just frustrating as hell. Cubs don't get it. Oh, well, they don't win the game in regulation. It goes to extra innings. All kinds of shit happens. And I'm watching this game. And this would happen 2 or 3 times a year. Honestly, I don't think that's hyperbole, but it would happen. And like you said, with a 3:00 game. So in 82, after 83, I think when they had more and more 3:00 games, it probably happened even more. It got too dark to play, and so then they would have to resume the next day to finish that game before they started the next game.
Right.
And so a couple things happened the next day. I'm going to do my because I know you've got a story unless it intersects, but this was a week where my dad was off of work, and we didn't take like big vacations because we were like, just not in that position at that point. And I remember he took us to a water slide somewhere near Elmhurst, and we're listening to the radio on the way home. And the next day, this game goes on and on and on. I don't know when they called it. I think it's said in the recap after at the top of the 18th it got called. So they played about an hour the next day.
Yeah, they played 10. Right. So they played 10 more innings after the missed call.
And I will say too that on the Tuesday, in the bottom of the 14th, Harry, and this is the first time I remember Harry saying "Take me out to the ball" in his first season, saying "Take me out to the ball game" in the bottom of the 14th. Oh, yeah. So he had some fun with it, and I believe he also did it. Or maybe he didn't because the Cubs had given up the lead at the top of the 21st. But going into the bottom of the 21st, I want to say, or maybe it was the bottom of the 20th or the 19th. We're driving the car at one point. Vince Lloyd's on the radio, and he's announcing these all these changes. I think Jerry Royce comes into the game. And, yeah, it's the bottom of the 20th. It's still a tie game. And this is absolutely true. I remember I was sitting next to my dad in the car. We're listening to the game. My sister's in the back seat. And Vince Lloyd's announcing, Jerry Royce is in the game. This guy moves here. He says, Ron, somebody goes here. And guess who's playing in left field? And I remember my dad just going, not Fernando. And as soon as he says it, Vince Lloyd, Fernando Valenzuela. And we just burst out laughing. And Fernando, who was actually like Rick Russo, I think kind of athletic for a fat guy. He was the defending Rookie of the Year and Cy Young Award winner. He took the league by storm in 81. And 82 was still their top pitcher and was not, hadn't pitched the day, too much before that or too much after, was able to get into that game in left field for the last 2 innings. Jerry Royce, by the way, came in for the 2 innings. The Dodgers scored a run the 21st. Royce becomes the winner. And, of course, Royce was the starter for the next game and then would go on to win that game. So Jerry Royce was awarded a win on the same 2 wins on the same day.
Oh yeah. Fernando could hit. He in 81 he drove in. He hit 250 and he drove in 7 runs. In 82 he hit his first career homer and he drove in 9 runs. He hit 3 homers in 84.
Wow.
He hit 2 homers. He was 34 years old playing for the Padres. He hit 2 home runs, drove in 8 runs.
Wow.
His career batting average, him and Bob Uecker, 200, right on
nice.
the dot. With 10 homers and 84 RBIs. Okay, so my story. I'm gonna get folksy here. So it was a Monday, right? That was the game started on a Monday.
No,
started on Tuesday.
Tuesday finished on
all right.
Correct.
So Tuesday apparently was move-in day for at the Winnebago County Fair for Angus cattle, because
what county?
Winnebago County. Winnebago County Fair.
Mm-hmm.
I was 9 years old, and Dad decided that it'd be good for young Andrew to raise a cow and show it at the fair. So I had a cow.
You're like a 4-H guy?
Yeah, I was in 4-H for a couple of years.
Well, your dad was a farmer. Of course, you'd probably.
My brother had showed for years. My famous story about my brother was his first cow. It was like a pet. I mean, he raised it from a calf, and he'd go out in the barn. Jim could lay the cow would lay in the pen, and Jim could lay on it. Use it like a pillow, and they were best friends. And he takes it to the fair, and he shows it, and it wins, I think, reserve grand champion. And they goes to the auctions. Somebody buys it, and I don't know if it was a grocery store. A lot of times, grocery stores would buy the grand champion and the reserve grand, so they could put a thing over the meat case that they. And so my brother was a kid. He was about as old as I was when this Cub game happened, and they couldn't take whoever bought it couldn't take the cow right then. They didn't have, so the cow came home. And then the next day, a trailer pulls up, and they're going to get the cow. And my brother realizes that this cow that he's raised, like a dog, is about to go meet its maker and become beef.
Right.
And he starts crying. He's a kid, and the guy hands him the check. And my dad loved to tell a story. Jim looked down at the check and went, "Okay, see ya."
He wiped his tears.
Dad and said, "All right, we doing this again next year?" Like, yeah. So I had to it was my turn. I had to take a cow to the fair. And this game had to have started at 1:20 because I remember we waited around, and when Eric Gregg blew the call, Dad's like, "All right, fuck it, let's go." So we put the cow, we spent time to put the cow in the trailer, we got in the thing, we drove to Pecatonica to go to the fairgrounds.
Right, game's still going on.
Get settled in, right? And
you're listening to Vince.
We're listening to it all the way there. It goes to extra innings, and then we go in and we jack around in there for a while. You got to unload all your gear and all that stuff, and you have to wait around a little bit, make sure the cow gets settled. Some 4-H kids would spend the night in the barn. They did it mostly so they could jack around after hours at the fairground. I was 9. I wasn't going to do that.
No, you're too young.
We got back in the truck, and the damn game's still going on. Dad's like, "What the hell?" So we get back home. We listened to it all the way home. And then the next day, we get back in the truck to go back to the fairgrounds. And I'm sure they started early. I'm sure they didn't wait till 1:20. They probably.
You said that, yeah. This is why you're convinced that it started at 1:20.
Yeah. So the next, I think they probably are. Because now you got to squeeze 2 games in on Tuesday. So
well, because they played 17, almost 2 games, which would be even back then 5 hours tops.
Well, what I'm saying is we probably got in the truck about before noon, and they probably were starting up at noon to start the second game to try to get it done,
Tuesday.
And then because then you got to have the break, and then you got to try to play 9 innings after that.
Yeah.
And we listened to it, and then so what is it? So in the top of the 21st, right?
Well, yeah, it was a 21-inning game.
Yeah. My nemesis, Jerry Royce has to bat for himself. He grounds out. Then Steve Sachs doubles. My nemesis, Ken Landreau, he walks. There was a wild pitch during his at bat. They put Sachs to third. And then Johnny B. Dusty Baker came up, hit a fly ball to right field, probably to Leon Durham. And at least according to Vince and Lou, Leon threw Sachs out at the plate.
Oh, I don't remember that.
And Eric got that call wrong. And the run scored.
Oh, my God. So we heard the same call. I just don't remember.
I remember that he got both.
Contentious.
That there were two plays at the plate, and he got them both wrong, and both went against the Cubs.
God, I hated Eric Gregg so much. He was in his prime in '82. God, so twice in that game. That's a great bookend to my story. It basically begins and ends with Eric Gregg blowing a fucking call, and wow.
So this is good. In the 21st, they moved Tommy Lasorda shuffling guys around. Fernando comes out, and Bob Welch goes in to play left field. And then this is good. This is Alan Ripley. Alan Ripley's having to bat. The Cubs are clearly out of
pitcher, by the way.
The pitcher who had given up the run in the top of the 21st is now batting, leading off the bottom of the 21st.
Yeah.
So
the next game starter is already in the game.
Tommy switches. He has Dusty go to left and Bob Welch go to right. Ripley flies out to center. So then Jody comes up, and Tommy has Welch and Dusty switch. Welch goes to right, or Welch goes to left, and Dusty goes to right. And
for who?
For Jody.
So, I would assume that Dusty goes to left and Welch goes to right for Jody.
It says Bob Welch moves from right to left. Dusty moves from left to right.
I gotta look at it. Okay.
Oh, I know. It's opposite. Okay, so after they... All right, now I can read it. Nothing like figuring this shit out while live on the podcast. For Alan Ripley, Bob Welch went in and replaced Fernando, so he's in left.
Fernando's out of the game.
Right, then they switched. Dusty went to left for Jody's at bat. Then they switched back for Steve Henderson. And Henderson grounded out second to end the game.
Henderson also, by the way, a right-handed hitter. So I don't know. Tommy Lasorda, the guy likes attention. Maybe he just wanted to get out there and.
Oh, we're gonna pitch Henderson away. That's what I was thinking. We're gonna make him hit it to right. So we'll put Dusty over there, or maybe he just thought, Dusty's a shitty outfielder. Let's move him. I'd rather have him hit the ball to Bob Welch. Maybe that's what Tommy was thinking.
No time like the present to point out that this was Alan Ripley's one season with the Cubs, and so I know for a fact that this happened in '82 during the season. So this is for your fact checkers out here. The Cubs won their 8,000th game in franchise history. I believe it may have happened in Houston, in the Astrodome, and Alan Ripley was the winning pitcher. I might be able to verify it somewhere, but or you can just take my word for it, because why the fuck would I make that up?
How many wins did Alan Ripley get that year?
He went 4-6. I just looked it up.
Let's see. His wins were in. He won at Pittsburgh. He won a home game against the Phillies. He won a home game against the Cardinals, and he won a game in San Francisco. Oh, and Aaron, right there it is. So he won 5 games. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
One of those, the one in Houston.
May 13th.
There you go.
He beat the Astros. The Cubs won 5-0 in the Astros.
Complete game shutout.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah, because I remember him walking off the mound. So not only did he get the win, but he was getting the spotlight as he walked off the field. Cubs win their 8,000th game in history.
Well,
he good old Alan Ripley. He
didn't. He pitched 6 innings. Only gave up 2 hits. Lee Smith got a 3-inning save. Only gave up 1 hit, struck out 2.
So much for that narrative about Ripley walking off the mound, but I do know he was the winning pitcher, and that was the 8,000th win in franchise history.
Oh, and it was a huge crowd in the Astrodome, 13,534.
Yeah.
The 13-19 Cubs beat the 14-19 Astros.
Yeah, Astros were kind of rearranging themselves. They were in between good periods, I think, after the whole the 80 team, 81, 79, when J.R. Richard went down, they struggled. Joe Niekro, they had good teams, and then kind of middling, never awful. And then they kind of 86, they came back with Mike Scott.
In fact, Ripley beat former Cub Joe Niekro.
Former Cub, yeah.
Joe Niekro
69
took
Cub.
the loss in the 8,000th win in Cub history.
How about that? Yeah, 69 Cub. Another thing that happened in '82, another thing that Dallas Green ushered in, because he's like, wake up, fucking franchise. How the hell did you not notice that this old cheap bohemian that built this fucking legacy brand by borrowing your ballpark for football for 50 years, retiring all these numbers? Like, what is wrong with you people? You've not even honored any of your past. So 1982 ushered another thing that came in with Dallas Green and Tribune, aside from all the new players and the new farm system and the new broadcaster and Harry, was pageantry.
Heine Zimmerman Day.
They retired Heine Zimmerman's number, even though he didn't wear a number in 1908.
Retired a blank.
But they pinstripe, but they got us all excited. And again, this was great stuff. This might have been maybe John McDonough, a young John McDonough may have had his hand in it. Maybe Dallas Green entrusted him. Hey, let's do some bold shit. Let's let's stop being so damn narrow and bland. And so we got our first ever number retirement in 1982, and it would be the only logical choice. Right? At that point in time.
Yes.
I believe 1982 was the year in which, Ernie Banks got elected into the Hall. He didn't play as late as 70. He got elected first ballot, right? Or did everybody get fucking dragged along back then? Nobody was the first ballot back then, maybe. Because if 82, I'm pretty sure 82 is a year that Ernie also. So maybe
he got inducted. He got inducted in 77.
Yeah, right. Okay. So, right. Of course, fucking P.K. Wrigley is like about to die or is dead. And then his widow dies. Then William Wrigley's like, oh, fuck, I got to pay all this like inheritance tax. And nobody's paying attention to the team, for a while. Ernie's in the Hall of Fame. So it takes a few years before Dallas Green, Tribune, John McDonough, whatever, they come on board in 82. And they're going to set it right. Let's honor this man while there are at least people alive that saw him play.
Yeah, Ernie was a first ballot Hall of Famer, 83.8%.
Terrific.
Like to know who the assholes were who said, no, he's not on first base.
There's always someone. There's been
greatest
one
power hitting shortstop of all time. To this day, he's one of only two shortstops who've ever hit 40 home runs in a season. The other one just happened, Fernando Tatis Jr.
Wow, even in the steroid era, none of those shortstops hit 40.
It's only Ernie.
No shit.
For the first
40
and whatever many years, Ernie was the only guy, and he had two. Had him back to back.
Were they both in his MVP years of
Yes.
58, 59?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So that's another thing, though, that connected kids. We knew about Ernie because our dads were Cub fans, right? We knew about him, but it was a thing now where just in case, let's build some sort of cohesion, some coherent brand here, right? Past, present, future. Let's get some inertia. Let's get some positive mojo. So that's another thing that happened in 82 is that, they at least sort of righted some of that. They just kind of woke up and acted like a real franchise.
I still think to this day it's weird the way the Cubs honor their past. Like, it's great that they're kind of catching up with the number retirements.
We did a whole 2 hours on the Wall of Fame last year, which I think have gone beyond like the Kinko's like plastic sheaths with a printout
down in a freaking it's like in an alley down. It's like, what the hell? They don't. They put them on the flagpole, so that's fine. They're relatively prominent, but there's the way they honor other things with those weird the flags on the grandstand where they're mostly
nobody can see those.
Code. Like they use initials or a number or whatever, and it's supposed to be significant. And most of the park you can't see them. If you're in the grandstand, you can't see them.
Even if you can see them, you can't read them.
Right, it's
not
stupid.
Even a guy with cataracts, right?
I completely think they botched when they finally won the World Series and they put the way they put the three flags up. I mean, honestly, you couldn't have found a more prominent place to put that than those. I just think it's strange.
What three flags? What do you the three World Series flags? 07, 08, 2016?
Yeah. I mean, they're fine. They're there, but it's like I'd have spray painted the whole fucking side of the park with the three.
Relax imagination.
But more than that, they now I have a feeling we're about to enter a the golden era of statues. You know, they've moved the statues. They're using the the cash grab for the sports book as an excuse to build Statue Row in Gallagher Way, which is where they're going to relocate all the statues except for Harry. Harry being dragged into the gates of hell by angry Cub fans is going to remain where it is. The player ones are going to move. They're adding Fergie this year.
It's like their answer to Yankee Stadium's monument, whatever park. Okay.
But to me, it's like, what's the holdup on some of these? Like, why? Ryne Sandberg retired in 96.
97.
Right? 97.
After the 97 season.
25 years have gone by, and he doesn't have a statue yet. Are we waiting for Ryne to die before we put the statue?
I guess that's true. I didn't even consider that. Okay. Because I was always bemoaning the fact that, geez, like, when they finally got around to getting the statues, it was all the DeRocher era Cubs. All right, fine. You know, there's still a sizable fan base.
Yeah, we're still recognizing the guys who didn't win anything.
But there's
fine.
nothing
They were
for
great players. They deserve their statues.
Right, but there's no Frank Chance or Gabby Hartnett or you know.
The Cubs have this rich history that goes back to the very beginnings, and you would think Cub history started in 1969 when you walk around it.
If you weren't geeks like you and me that like are into the history and realize that holy shit, this was a sterling brand for the first 75 years of their existence. They weren't always a laughingstock. Thanks to their own ownership, like not even at least out of embarrassment, you would think, just promoting the earlier dominant era that they had. But no, we had to do that research on our own.
And then they've made the whole Sammy thing so unnecessarily weird.
Right. That's like, you could make that bankable somehow and not be weird. Right?
And they didn't even have to do that. They could have literally just when they first took over, they should have just done the bare minimum. Literally, Sammy comes out, he throws out a first pitch, he sings a stretch, and then you don't have to do anything else ever. But this weird, he says he's never been asked back. And they're like, well, he knows what he did. It's like, no, he doesn't. He didn't do anything to you. He didn't own the fucking team back then. Whatever he supposedly did that was so terrible.
Right. That one is such a ginormous elephant in the room. It's
I'm not saying you have to retire Sammy's number or
no. You're not.
Or
give
him a statue. But the fact that they've made him this pariah, when honestly you have a whole generation of Cub fans that are Cub fans because of Sammy.
I know, and they're very. I mean, like if you don't have any context and you just pull up the numbers, you're like, holy shit, this guy was incredible. All right,
he has the most home runs in team history. He has more home runs as a Cub than Ernie Banks.
So, see, Dallas Green would
have the most ever, considering the fact that they now are apparently never going to keep anybody more than 7 years. So
correct. But that proves my point. Dallas Green wasn't fucking around. He takes care of Ernie Banks right away. He dismissed a lot of sentimental fans that were like, they love the day baseball, they love the shitty teams. But he also sort of at the same time, without being like patronizing or like lessening himself, he also honored the past by Ernie. He brought back Fergie, which was not necessarily, it wouldn't be with Dallas Green a sentimental decision because Fergie was productive. But like he wasn't like a complete like just be giving a fuck you to the fans of the shitty team, although he would have been justified to do so. He was very respectful of this of their past, so they retired Banks's number. They brought back Fergie, so Fergie's in uniform while his old teammates getting his number retired. There's some synergy there that again, that's all new shit for us. Like what's going on around Clark and Addison? Good things are happening.
When I sell this podcast to Spotify and I get the big check, and I'm gonna buy out the Ritz. I'm gonna buy the Cubs. The first thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna make a Kerry Wood statue. I'm gonna put it in thing, but it's gonna be an interactive statue. What it's gonna be is a statue of Kerry with his arm in the MRI machine, and then you can take a picture of yourself like analyzing Kerry's MRI results, just standing there like pointing, like, this looks bad.
Right. Look at
the most popular statue will be the one of Carlos Zambrano punching Michael Barrett.
Yes.
We'll make like a little kind of a scale model replica of a dugout, and you can like sit on the bench kind of behind them, and you can have your family take a picture of you like observing from the kind of craning your neck on the bench while Carlos is punching him. It was great when the Cubs did that thing last week where if you sent them a picture your favorite picture from Wrigley Field, they would make you like a little digital, like postcard you could send to people.
Okay.
So I sent them one, and they refused to make one out of it. I found a shot of Carlos. This is great. It's right before he punches Barrett. Carlos has his glove, and he's like holding. He has his glove almost on Michael's head. Like he's holding him in place with his glove so that he can get a completely unencumbered punch right in his face. That'll be great. And then, of course, I'm going to get special permission from Major League Baseball. We're going to install a Luis Valbuena bat flip statue on the field. The guys, guys are just going to have to play around it. We'll have it in foul territory with the bat flip. It'll be the one when he bat flipped the single off of Scott Feldman with the Astros.
Will the bat be suspended in the air by an otherwise sort of undetectable sort of a string, or will it like fling up a bat and then every few minutes that you have to be careful about as you walk?
That would be good. It would make it more exciting if the bat kind of rotated.
The physicists have done it in a way that he flips it where it falls down a chute each time.
It just kind of goes up every few minutes,
and it gets sucked in, and then but you still have to be careful when you walk through. I have to give one last obscure reference to a game that happened in 82, which would be the penultimate game of the season. We actually talked about this on Twitter when we did the 2 episodes ago. We did the 1980 Cubs, and some Forklift got in there with a Scott Thompson reference, and then there were some replies, and I brought up the fact that I thought it was the last game of the season, but it was the penultimate game. But Scott Thompson, of course, was a Cub prospect that Cub fans like today, Prospect Perverts, tend to they overrated him. He wasn't that good, but we wanted him. I know my dad wanted him to be the opening day center fielder in 1980, before Preston Gomez went with Carlos Lascano. And this Scott Thompson, he looked like he would be a good hitter. His left-handed stick, hit line drives, but he just, really never panned out. But my dad took me to the game this day, fan appreciation weekend. I remember I got a Cubs binder, a little thing that even snap the things that you could pull back. Pretty nifty. Dallas Green, John McDonough. You talk about things are different here. This year, things were definitely different in 1982. But on the penultimate day of the season, I remember Scott Thompson went 4 for 5. Must have been his only 4-hit game of his career. And then the only other memory that I have of this game was that my dad and I were walking home down Clark, not walking home, but walking towards his car on Clark Street. And we got the Clark and Grace, which was hadn't yet been named for the 2 first basemen of the 1989 NLCS, but it was only about 2 blocks northwest of of Wrigley Field. There was the Piano Man Bar, which actually had a piano player, and my dad would sometimes like to just drop in, have a beer. I can have a pop. Always enjoyed it. And we stopped into the Piano Man after that game in 1982. But actually kept scoring that game. Had it somewhere still. Scott Thompson, 4 for 5. The season was about to end. The Cardinals, of course, would go on to greater things that season. Doesn't matter because a couple years later, Cubs would get their crack. That's it. I gave my Scott Thompson props.
Yeah, I'm sure we went to games in 82. I don't remember off the top of my head. I remember we'll wait to the 81 when I get to tell the story of my first Cub game, which is very memorable.
Which sounded similar to my 1980 game. It's a walk-off, you said, yes. But we'll get to it. It's a teaser.
Yeah. 84 was the year that I went to a bunch of games. This is how the 84 Cubs was unexpected that they were good. And the Rockford Public Library, Mom would take me in there, and for every X amount of books that you read, you got Cub tickets.
Air quotes, read.
Yeah, I read most of them.
I'm sure you did, but like you could.
But
you
yeah,
could
I was checking out books just to
out.
make sure.
Right.
And I believe we went to 5 free Cub games that year, and the Cubs won them all.
Wow.
I remember Dad bragging about that. Andrew and I went to 5 games and they won them all, and we didn't pay for any of them.
I feel like the 84 season was very much, it's obviously it's linear from the 80. 82 was ground zero to some good things that would happen for the first time in our lives, in the first time for a long time for older guys. So I remember it fondly. They were a 73-win team, but even as a 10-year-old kid, kind of had a sense that, something could break here. 83 is a little bit of a setback, and they were not much better or worse, and then things ignited in 84. But I don't have really, I have positive associations with the 82 Cubs. Funny as it sounds, but in the context, it makes sense.
So you were surprised they didn't catch fire the last 39 games of 83 when Charlie Fox took over?
Yeah, we thought maybe that might do it. And Carmelo Martinez homered his first official at-bat, but not plate appearance. Yeah, 83 was not bad. That'll be fun when we talk that one up. We'll go down the Elia rabbit hole. I mean, Elia got through this season unscathed. He was a good manager. I do think, just in talking about it today, how I just feel he's probably a good manager for Sandberg. Sandberg got off to a terrible start to his career, and he didn't get buried. So, but of course, maybe that was coming down from on high. I think Dallas Green always had his eye on Sandberg.
Well, Elia famously, he coached with Lou in Seattle the entire time Lou was there. And when
Later
Lou
on,
took the Cub job, he was going to hire Lee. And Lee basically said, you know what? They basically committed and said, I don't want to do that.
Too much stigma, too much attention because of that, which is unfortunate. But
it's one of those things where we would have had to put up with it for a few days.
He'd be fine,
and
right?
Then it becomes,
And it's also one of those things
that
has
once a year on the anniversary.
Right. Well, I heard it today. Lynn Bramer on WXRT does his opener, and he does a pretty funny bit where it's all bleeped out, but he recites it, and they're saying, well, it's a one-man show at the Schubert Theater. So I heard it today, in fact. And it's actually one of those things that has actually gotten stronger through the years, I feel like. We'll talk about it in 83 because he did not get fired after that. It was early in the season, and the Cubs did fucking turn it around until they petered out. But we'll dive into that because there is some nuance there. But in 82, Lee Elia first season got kind of like Dick Duran after the disaster where Dave Wannstedt bottomed the Bears out. Like Lee Elia at least turned the around. He didn't take us anywhere, but he and Dallas Green and all those new players, the culture totally did fucking change in 82. And it was only my third full season following the Cubs, and it was like night and day compared to 1980 and 1981.
Yeah, and we'll talk about it when the wheel spins around 83. But the players loved it. I mean, there was their manager. Yeah. And not only was he standing up for them, but when you listen to it, we can play it.
We'll play it. We'll probably play it. We get to it.
Where was Lee wrong anywhere in there? Nowhere. Everything he said was right and hysterical. So.
Yep.
I shouldn't say poor Lee Elia. That's what he's.
No, he's fine. He's fine. He's made a nice career. He's still alive.
I mean, we can get a whole thing. Maybe we would have been better off had he stuck around.
Could have grown with that team.
I don't know that the 84 Cubs won because of Jim Fry, and they may have met their demise because of him instead of.
No, they won because of Dallas Green, I feel like. Because Dallas continued to shift and deal and do everything all the way up until opening day in 84 when he got Dernier and Matthews.
Yeah, and there's a whole other rabbit hole to go down about it. So if they never hired Jim Fry in 84, do they I find it hard to believe the 84 Cubs don't win. If they do everything else, I find it hard to believe they don't go to the playoffs.
Right, like Green still gets Sutcliffe and Eckersley.
He's not around to fuck everything up after they fire Dallas. Which he
did.
So,
oh my God,
boy!
I look forward to the agony of revisiting that, Andy. I haven't really considered that before. Thanks for.
Then I can tell my
that was going to lurk in my subconscious.
Jim at a Cub convention one year.
So. Yes. Wait, you'll have to bring it up again. You've mentioned it before. Might as well bring it up now while we finish. I don't know, maybe not. Jim Fry had nothing to do with the 82. I think Jim Fry probably got fired during the 82 season in Kansas City because he was himself 2 years removed.
Well, how about the Dallas hiring the guy he beat in the World Series to manage his team?
That's right. Yeah, they managed against each other.
Yeah, I got a whole Jim Fry thing we can do in 84 and 85 about the stupid little tennis shoes he wore. And but no, so at a Cub convention, we ended up in line. He was sitting with, I share the balls over here. I could see who else signed the ball. He was sitting at a table with another person. And Dad and I wanted the autograph of whoever he was sitting with. And so
was it Ruben Amaro?
Probably. Sorry. Yeah. So we got in line to get and so he's first. So of course you're just gonna let him sign the ball. And they handed it to him, and I looked at him and said, we'll get him in Game 6. As he famously, although I kind of debunked this when I did a rewatch of Game 5 in '84.
Sutcliffe was gassed.
Yes, I think Rick Sutcliffe would have ended up in a puddle.
And
it really
also
it really wouldn't have killed Rick to at some point in his career actually been in shape. That might have.
Well, but also Jim Fry may have been partially senile. He had no idea what the dig was anyway, right? But
that was at the time. There's a lot of thought that they should have simply gone for the kill and started Sutcliffe in Game 4.
It might have worked.
It was only a matter of hours.
I know.
He got extra rest because
it was a night game,
and he did melt down because it was hot.
It was hot out, San Diego,
and he's a little tubby, and he decided he needed the big beard to pitch in the summer. And they give him a 3-0 lead, and then he gets tired, and then bad things happen. And we get into that in '84. Ridiculous things happen too.
Right.
So.
I don't need to make a note of it because I'm sure it'll come up organically. But like making a note to discuss the alternate history wherein the Cubs, 83 Cubs, don't get off to a slow start. Lee Elia doesn't lose his shit. They actually have this linear progression that 82 begins, and then he's there in 84. We can go down that rabbit hole next week. We'll just conclude by saying we just finished Lee Elia's one complete season with the Cubs.
Yeah. All right. Well, there they were, the mostly nondescript 1982 Cubs.
But the beginning of something special.
Yes. All right. Well, we'll do this again next week.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Andy.
Many of us have herpes.